welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 143 for Monday, May 31st, 2021. My name is Jonny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is a lightly barbecued Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello. The temperature just keeps on rising around here, which is a good thing heading into what will be June very, very soon. If you'd like to hear more about thermometers and barbecues, and the pricing of things that confuses all of us, then check out the Render Distance. It's the extended version of the podcast, and you can get it at patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
So, we have a lot to cover in today's episode. It is quite a timely one. We are recording a couple of hours later than we normally do, and it's a good thing we were, because boy, do we have some stuff to cover in the news. But first of all, let's check in and see what's been going on in the Minecraft life of Joel Duggan.
So I split my Minecraft time last week again between the snapshot survival gameplay and the Citadel. I had been just playing Wednesdays, but I've been trying to find the geode in the survival snapshot world, so I played both Wednesday and Friday. And I didn't find it. I'm kind of hamstrung by not finding a geode, because amethyst and amethyst crystals and all the things that you can do with them, along with building with calcite and is it smooth basalt is the other thing that's around them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've not been able to use any of those blocks yet. I know I could use them in creative, and I might end up resorting to that because I do want to explore them, but I have yet to go through those, which also meant that the new achievements, which we'll talk about in just a minute, I couldn't really get to many of those because a good number of them actually revolve around like using stuff with geodes and amethyst crystals. I worked on a few things. I was able to, I don't think I put a goat in a boat, but I did a few of the achievements that I had access to, like copper and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I do find that I'm hitting kind of a roadblock, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show as well. But it's one of those things where it just seems to be I'm doing vanilla farm automation to explore the content, but until I find this extra content, I'm kind of stuck.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's still good. It's still fun. So when I flipped over to the Citadel, I was building, and now I find that I'm working on this medieval town and thinking about the other blocks, like the deep slate, and whether that will work as different roof tiles, and like there's a bunch of different things that are in my mind. So I'm glad that I had a current project, because there's other things that I haven't started yet where I'm just like, whoa, do I want to wait until I have access to just a few more block palettes, to work on that kind of stuff. So that actually might affect the way that I'm working on Citadel right now. But I have been, and I think I mentioned last week, working on a carpenter workshop that had like a water wheel and had a gantry crane and stuff like that. So that this weekend I finished up the roof, the gears inside the tower, the final exterior and interior builds. And it was really challenging because I had to once again revert to using gray stone. I tried to go the brick and the granite route, and it just didn't look very medieval to me. It looked more like modern city brick. And it might have worked as like a chimney, but as the whole tower in this build, it just wasn't quite what I was hoping to achieve. So I went with brick, and it took me a few tries, but I did end up getting a tower design that was different than other things immediately next door to it, but still unique enough and the samey enough that it felt like it blended in with the town. I do feel I'm a little bit spent on the gray and the brown, though. Yeah. It just tends to be a little bit repetitive now, which I guess is authentic, because most medieval towns would be gray and brown. I think the difference is that there's not a lot of variation in the gray. We have a lot of 50% gray in Minecraft, and that might be where Deep Slate might come in handy later on down the line. I did make some use of the tables and chairs data pack by Chuck, as well as the more mob heads and the armor stand data packs from Vanilla Tweaks that we have installed on the server, just for fun, just for some creative things, for things like the workbench and the table saw and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, at the end of the day, I'm quite happy with it. It came out better than I was anticipating, because I was getting a little frustrated with it. I think the only thing that I find that I'm still not happy with, but I'm hamstrung by Minecraft, is the roof. It does feel very day one Minecraft, because it's an oak roof, like an oak stair roof. And because there's not a lot of like variation, you're kind of like, well, I want to put some extra blocks in here, but like, because everything stairs, like I really can't. So you have to go with geometry differences to try and break it up.
Yeah, you put ridges in the roof with full blocks and it kind of changes things up. And I entirely know what you mean, both with like oak being day one Minecraft, and it's weird how we build up this kind of bias towards the material. But like oak and cobblestone will forever to me feel like early village houses and stuff, no matter how like beautiful and ornate you end up making things. And I feel you with the grey and brown fatigue as well, because that's always the way it goes with materials that you can get a lot of very easily, like stone and wood. There aren't too many color variations that don't just immediately stand out. Like you think about switching things up and using different colors of wood, but you think, would this really have a bright orange or a bright blue roof in the middle of this medieval town? And typically no. And like, it's the reason I built the roof of my castle on the survival guide out of nether brick and red nether brick at the time, was because I wanted it to have a tile roof feel and something that maybe felt a little bit more fantasy inspired, but I just didn't want to make the entire thing out of wood. Otherwise, it would look just like everything else around it, and I really wanted it to stand out. But making those decisions is very tricky, and I think that's why a lot of medieval builds end up with the kind of the overgrown feel where you just throw a bunch of leaves in as though, you know, vines have come kind of climbing along the roof, just to throw in a bit of color and a bit of textural variation that looks natural compared to how structured you have to be with the wood and the stone.
And I did that with a vine going up the side of the tower, mostly because I wanted to take a screenshot, and there's a section of riverbank that hasn't been touched. Like it's basically like a sheer cliff that's not even been looked at, and it's eventually going to have maybe some stairs and some access to something. I was using the area behind the tower as like my kind of staging ground for building, so there will eventually be something there as a building. I don't know what it's going to be. But yeah, like you're right. Like you end up having to go the route of peppering things with overgrowth and whatnot. And because the tower goes into the water and there is a water wheel, I wanted to use mossy cobble and mossy bricks, which means that the bottom at least had to be gray, because we knew we were going to be using those blocks. And because there's no other mossy variants in the other things, I guess maybe in the Caves and Cliffs update, you might be able to use rock copper blocks that might look like they have a little bit of green on them. But it depends on how well that meshes in with the other blocks. And yeah, so I'm anticipating a struggle with the number of other buildings I have yet to add to this medieval town, and trying to make them different. I've done some andesite stuff. I've done some diorite stuff. I have not yet been able to make granite work for me. But never say never. You know, like, I mean, I'm happy to accept the challenge. I'm just like, how am I going to make this work? And I think I might just have to wait until there is this kind of like underlying, we'll say, story or age to the town, where the newer section, the western part of town, is also meant to be the more wealthy section of town, at which point I might be able to get away in my head with some brighter colors and some fancier looking stonework, right? That might not pass as like, you know, like the market stuff where there's the carpenter and the baker and the inn and the stone church. Like that all feels kind of not grungy, but it feels like a working class as opposed to, you know, someone that's just kind of sitting around and being more social. You know?
Yeah, and you can imagine some wealthy merchant has connections further afield and is able to get nicer stone shipped in from a quarry further away and that kind of stuff. So you can definitely start to justify it at that point.
So I'm writing down that now I have to build a quarry.
There you go. Well, the idea is popping off on the show as always.
That's it for me. What have you been up to, man?
So I have been working feverishly to get some stuff done at the museum, knowing that at this point we're on a bit of a tight deadline, and not quite knowing how tight the deadline turned out to be, but I've been working on a little bit of stuff for remaining exhibits, finishing off sections of the structure itself, and looking for places to just stash all of the stuff I haven't done yet, whether it's just simply throwing a bunch of blocks in a room and saying, this is the room that's all about, you know, all of the dyed stuff. So I didn't want to have a separate exhibit for wool when I could also put that with wool, carpet, beds, banners, like all of the stuff that you make out of those dyed materials. And the same for concrete, terracotta, concrete powder, glazed terracotta, and glass. That can all basically go in one room because it's all the materials that have 16 colors in the game. So that's kind of where my brain has been leaning instead of going more in depth with those exhibits. However, I decided that I needed to double down on the generated structures, sort of to balance out the the overall layout of the museum as it currently is, because the side that has the overworld biomes built out and the generated structures from the overworld kind of outweighs all of the stuff that I've done on the nether wing of the museum. And so I've started rebuilding a bastion remnant. I say started, I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through, but it's almost impossible to tell because a bastion remnant is the most ruined, finicky structure to reproduce faithfully if you're building it block for block in the overworld, which I am. I've got a bastion remnant that I found out in a lava lake, and I picked one of the housing bastion because I thought those were going to be maybe some of the smaller ones. I didn't want to rebuild a treasure bastion given how monolithic they are and how much blackstone would have to go into it, and the intricacies of the interior were going to be a lot to handle. But with the housing bastion, I thought it's modular, it's got a relatively small footprint, and it looks like how people expect a bastion to look if they're not looking for the treasure ones in particular. There's the sort of larger tower section and then the individual modules around a field of netherwart in the middle. And I found one of those in a creative test copy of the world out in a lava lake where there was no other blocks around it. And I thought, great, I'll just take a bunch of screenshots of this. Nope, bad idea, because the screenshots really don't convey depth and didn't have all of the angles of the interior. So what I've been doing is running a second instance of Minecraft side by side with the main one, where I'm building things, recording it all using Replay Mod and creating a time lapse of it. And oh boy, it's intensive work to get the accuracy of each of these kind of, interiors and everything when the floor is all broken up. And it's difficult to tell what it looked like initially because of so much of it that's been added with decaying blocks, with cracked blackstone and basalt to kind of imply that bits of it are falling apart. It's so difficult to imagine that as a complete structure and then just remove all of the blocks that you don't need. I'm actually having to build it ruined in the first place, and it's quite a task. It's been a very... I think I probably put maybe 5 or 6 hours into the build already, and I probably need to put in 2 more before I'm satisfied with it. It's a lot. But I'm now doing this at a museum that has... We have a mob switch in the world now, so no spawns in that area at all, and that's for the better, because I can't imagine lighting this up accurately either to make sure that nothing would spawn inside it once I was done. So I think for the purposes of the museum, having a mob switch there is a pretty ideal experience, really.
Man, that thing is huge, and to look at the way that other screenshots are going, the way that you're sharing them in the live chat here, like it's a wing. It's only a fraction of the size of the museum. And like, man, I on top of the geometry and the challenge of putting together a bastion, like the blackstone just all looks the same to me.
It does.
And I can't imagine how annoying that must be to try to distinguish like one kind of blackstone from another, from cracked, from like, stairs. Like, what did they use to make this thing look the way that it looks? I mean, at least basalt stands out against blackstone. You can kind of spot that a mile away. But yeah, that must be tedious. Would be a word that would come to mind.
Yeah, putting it lightly.
Yeah. All that said, though, looks fantastic. Like, I mean, it definitely. There's no mistaking it. Like, it definitely. It does not look like another fortress. It looks like a bastion.
Yeah. And I've considered using mods like Lightmatica to maybe give me a blueprint, but honestly, with the amount of like bridging around and placing stuff that I have to do, it wouldn't really be that much quicker of a process. And so yeah, it's been tough, but it's going to be worth it. It's going to be, again, like as authentic a snapshot of this bastion as I can provide in the overworld. And instead of lava in the floor, I'm probably going to do what I did with the lava flow that I built a while ago and just alternate shroom lights and magma blocks to kind of give it a little bit of danger, but not like you fall in this and then you die within 3 seconds. I figured it was probably best to make it a little bit easier on the visitor, and I think it's going to turn out quite well as a fresh exhibit. But yeah, you're right. Blackstone is kind of difficult. I have had to recount a bunch of these structures and make changes as I go because I realized that I counted 3 blocks when I should have counted 2 and so forth. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's going to be fine. Working on an end city after this, which I think is going to be a much more pleasant thing to build on account of it being a complete looking structure. and reproducing the end ship is going to be a fun thing. And then later in the week, I'm going to start on the mob exhibit. And aside from the exterior of the building, that's probably going to be one of the last things I have to do. So fingers crossed it's all going to get done on time, because we should probably roll straight into the news. Oh boy, do we not have a great deal of time left. We delayed our episode by a couple of hours today, and for good reason, because Minecraft 1.17 now has a release date. We'll have a link to the article on Minecraft.net that explains this, but Caves and Cliffs Update Part 1 is coming out on June 8th. That is a week from tomorrow. If you're listening to this podcast on the day it comes out, the day it is recorded, June 8th. So the update will be available for Minecraft Bedrock Edition on Xbox Series X, Series S, Xbox One, PlayStation 5, PS4, Nintendo Switch, iOS, Android, and Windows 10, as well as, of course, Java Edition on Windows, macOS, and Linux, all coming day and date June 8th. In addition to that, we got the first pre-release for 1.17, which perked everybody's ears up a little bit last week. And the pre-release says, from now on, you should mostly see bugs being fixed. In addition to that, pre-releases don't follow the regular snapshot cadence of releasing on Wednesdays. So keep an eye out for future pre-releases as we head towards June 8th. Additionally, based on feedback from the community, they have decided to include candles in Part 1 of Caves and Cliffs again for Java players. Candles will become available in Bedrock Edition shortly after the release of Part 1, so in a dot release for Caves and Cliffs Part 1 on Bedrock. New features in 1.17 Pre-1 include a new set of advancements, which Joel alluded to a little bit earlier. So we have whatever floats your goat for floating in a boat with a goat, wax on and wax off for applying wax to and scraping wax off of a copper block, the cutest predator for catching an axolotl in a bucket, the healing power of friendship for teaming up with an axolotl and winning a fight, glow and behold for making a sign glow, light as a rabbit for walking on powder snow with leather boots, Surge Protector for having lightning strike a lightning rod near a villager without setting the area on fire. And Is It a Bird? Is It a Balloon? And Is It a Plane for looking at a parrot, a ghast, and a dragon, respectively, using a spyglass. Some changes in 1.17 Pre-1 include candles having been added back to the creative inventory, and the recipes for crafting and dyeing candles are once again available in survival. Candles now have a different texture when lit, and we've seen a few iterations from Jasper Burstra throughout the week on this one as well. Glowing text on signs now has an outer glow, making the text in dark colors much more visible in the dark. And holding down the spacebar now increases the scroll speed of the end credits once you've jumped through the end portal. A few technical changes in 1.17 Pre-1 that I thought were worth bringing up. A full list of these changes is on the Minecraft.net blog post, but they have added an F3 and L shortcut to generate and persist performance metrics from in-game. Pressing F3 and L while in the game will start a recording for 10 seconds which captures metrics such as tick durations, used heap sizes, and other more detailed stats. Pressing F3 and L before that 10-second limit ends the recording early, but this will get saved to a zip file in your debug/profiling folder and can be used for performance regression analysis if included in bug reports. The exact metrics, output format, and names are susceptible to change within versions. It says their plan is to continue iterating on which metrics to capture. There are a full list of bugs. Obviously, they're focusing on bug fixes right now, so this pre-release is chock full of bug fixes for recent and older features. We haven't included any of those in our news this week, but you can find a full list at the Minecraft.net blog post linked in the show notes.
Minecraft Dungeons Hidden Depths DLC has been released. To quote the blog post on Minecraft.net, a shard from the Orb of Dominance has been wreaking havoc, and it's up to you to free the tides from the dangerous undertow of corruption. New weapons, gear, and artifacts are waiting beneath the surface among countless treasures. DLC features include things like adding 3 new underwater missions, 2 story levels, and 1 secret level, a new ocean-themed set of weapons, artifacts, and armor to help you combat undersea variants of Minecraft dungeon mobs, and 10 new achievements/trophies to unlock on your adventures. Free update features for players that have not yet downloaded the DLC include raid captains. Taking down these dangerous foes will immediately change the way you play the game. Defeat them and they'll drop one of 2 tokens, a threat banner, which will instantly increase the mission that threat level, or a mystery banner, which adds a rules modifier to your current mission. Survive the mission with tokens in tow, and you'll earn the raid captain's bounty, a special reward at the end of the mission. The anniversary event is also on right now. To celebrate 1 year since the release of Minecraft Dungeons, players can complete seasonal trials similar to the Halloween event to unlock the cake armor, a cape with sprinkles, and other treats.
So, that's going to basically wrap up that anniversary event in Dungeons around the time 1.17 releases. So if anybody's looking for something to do in between now and the release of Minecraft 1.17, give Minecraft Dungeons a play if you haven't already. It's fun. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later because this is effectively our round table week. Usually we bring a couple of different topics to the table, and having played Minecraft Dungeons on stream this Thursday, I thought it was going to be fun to give you guys a bit of a report on my experiences with the DLC. But now we have a lot of stuff to talk about, specifically the fact that we've got a week until 1.17 gets its full release, and we have a bunch of stuff in this pre-release that is worth discussing. So you mentioned earlier that you'd had a go at a couple of the advancements and stuff like that. Has anything stuck out to you from this pre-release? Are you happy that candles are back?
We explored some candles, played around with those a little bit because I do have the bee farm going full tilt now. I don't remember how many bees, but I just kind of look over and go, yeah, it's a lot. And so I don't ever have to wait to get honeycomb to use for wax copper, which means I had lots on hand along with some string to play around with some candles. They haven't changed a whole lot. They still look the same to me, with the exception, of course, of the lit texture, which is cool. And I think works better on some than others. There's some of the warmer candles like orange and red look better when they're lit than something like a blue or a gray candle. The colors seem to be a little bit different, but as you mentioned, Japa is probably going through some iterations on those before they go in. So I don't really have anything terribly, in depth to say about them until they're actually released in the game as final. Nice that they're there. Again, like I didn't see the reason for them to be delayed. So it's nice that they're in, especially because what they're made of is stuff from previous releases, right?
Yeah. Just judging by the changelogs saying that they'll be arriving in Bedrock Edition later, I am more confident in this being a reason that we floated a couple of weeks ago when candles were removed from one of the snapshots. I'm fairly certain that Bedrock development is the reason for the delay. You hadn't seen candles or bundles, in fact, the other thing that was removed in Bedrock Edition before this point, and so I have a feeling that they probably don't want to communicate this out loud as such, because there's enough division in the community between like Bedrock and Java development. They didn't want to just straight up say, hey, Bedrock is the reason these things are delayed, because it's much more complex than that. But yeah, I have a feeling the reason they were taken out was they didn't think they were going to be able to deliver them for Bedrock right away.
And I mean, as someone that's just built, a few things in a medieval style, and there are dark corners of my build that I wouldn't mind having a little bit of light. I'm not really looking to block mobs. It's just that, it's nice if you put some details into a rafter or a loft in a barn or something like that. If it's not completely empty, it'd be nice to have a candle or something up there to kind of like highlight a couple of the things that you worked really hard designing. So I'm looking forward to trying those out. I think they're going to look better in like medieval chandeliers and stuff than lanterns do. There's a bunch of different things that'll be done. What does have me curious about them is that, and I thought about this when I was using them, is that there's two different textures, and there's several different states to every candle, because you place them down just like sea pickles. So like there's 1 through 4. So each one of those placements gives you a different model essentially. So there's 4 different models, 8 different textures, plus a lit or unlit animation. I'm just wondering, for the people that are not into medieval Minecraft and people that are not, like people that are building a modern city that have no use for candles, perhaps, that could be really cool. Like that might give you an opportunity to do something really creative and have one block in Minecraft that has like a lot of different options that you could then do a data pack or something really cool for. So that kind of thing is cool. Like it's not just a single block, pick it up, put it down. Like there's got some flexibility to it. I think is if anybody wants to customize it later, I think it's got some potential there.
Yeah, if you want to have like one candle be something small like a lamp, but then 3 or 4 candles could be a TV, and then it has the glow effectively built into it. There's some fun stuff you can do there, suspending your disbelief and messing with some block bench stuff, I imagine. Yeah, like I'm quite glad to see that candles are back in general because I was looking forward to them, and I think I have a couple of cool ideas for them now that they are back in the fold. Glowing text is a thing. I think it's pretty cool looking, and aside from being like 100% more readable, it's turned glow ink into a must-have for anybody who wants to do more modern neon light-looking stuff, right? Like if folks haven't seen this, I encourage you to check out some of the screenshots the devs have been sharing on Twitter. I'll try and find some to put in our show notes as well, because it genuinely looks like it looks a lot more gamey. I think the main thing is that it's going to be kind of strange seeing glowing neon text on signs that are made out of wood in the average like medieval build. It's not really going to look very good, but then at that point you're expecting text to be readable at closer range anyway, so you don't need to worry about the glow effect as much.
Yeah, no, that was my takeaway as well. I explored this on one of the snapshot streams, and I mean, I did it on the wood signs in my storage area just because, like, well, why not? It's going to make it a lot easier to read when I've got 8 brown chests and barrels and brown signs on them when just black text. Like, it's going to be a lot easier to color code this kind of stuff. Make the redstone red, make the tool chest gray or brown, make the sandbox yellow, and just kind of see. And it does make it a lot easier to just kind of really quickly pick out where things are sitting. But you're 100% right. It looks peculiar on a wooden sign. It's an odd sensation. What I did find really cool about it, though, is that, like a torch, you can see it from miles away.
Yeah.
Now, you can't read it, but if you had a way of filling up that sign with a certain character or text or dots or like whatever it is that you want to do to create either a pattern or I think it might be more effective if there was several of them in a row. Like, it gives you a non-block light colored light in Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
And if, depending on how you're using it and how creative you are with hiding the fact that it's on a sign, I mean, it's visible from very far away. You could even do something really fun, like maybe create or recreate the eyeballs of spiders, and you could just have them in your dark base and mess with friends and see how many think that there's spiders creeping around, in your base. Like, it's really, really interesting, and it's one of those things that, like, that's really cool, but it looks really odd on a wooden sign, and I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, King B-Dog shared a screenshot on Twitter that he said some people had done this with signs where you basically fill it up with the equals sign on all 4 rows, just as many equals signs as you can throw in there, and it kind of has that like shutter shades look to it, almost the kind of like rave shades in all sorts of different colors. And then you put those side by side, you can create rainbow effects. It's like the kind of stuff I can imagine people adding to beacons and stuff like that whenever people have the glass on a piston feed tape, so it changes the color of a bunch of beacons in a row. I can see people doing lots of really fun stuff with this, and I think even for stuff like multiplayer minigames and hubs and stuff like that, just having something where the text looks like that without extra plugins and stuff to add it to the game, I think it's going to make that a lot more readable, a lot more accessible to people who need to read that kind of stuff up close, but also I think just a fun, colorful way of exaggerating the text on a sign is going to be super fun. Other things from this changelog, the new advancements seem kind of fun to me. Again, they're a really good way to guide players to new features, especially for newer folks coming in who haven't been keeping track of what's in this update. They did the same thing with Village and Pillage. They did the same thing with the Nether update, adding in a few things that hint at the possibilities and encourage you to craft the stuff that you might otherwise not really see a use for. Like, I can fully expect that some people who aren't all that keen on stuff like the spyglass are still going to have a go at crafting one just so they can get the 3 advancements associated with it, which I notice is one for the overworld, one for the nether, and one for the end. So encouraging you to keep that in your inventory through each of the dimensions, take it with you, look at a ghast, look at the dragon. I think it's interesting that it says a dragon in the snapshot changelog as well, and we know of the dragon, but the idea that there might be more than one type of dragon in the future, and it doesn't just say the ender dragon, is still pretty funny.
Yeah, that was the only thing where I'm just, when I looked at that, like, despite not having a geode, I was like, well, I'm not doing that. Like, I didn't feel like gearing up and fighting the dragon again in my snapshot world.
Yeah.
And again, like I have the capability. I know exactly where there's some goats. I even have them in a pen. It was just miles away. I'm just like, I'll do it the next time I go over, because I have to get there by boat anyway, so it would not be terribly difficult.
Yes.
The other thing that the advancements do, which is nice, is that even if you're not a new player, maybe you're a seasoned player, maybe you even do a weekly podcast about Minecraft, and you neglected to put together, even though you know that an axe will remove wax from copper. But when you are trying to find just that right state of oxidation, you just forget about the axe until you go, oh, I don't have to babysit this thing. I can just let it go full oxidation and then come by, hit it twice and be like, done. We're fine. Just wax it and we're good. So it did, like, that reminder from the advancements did lessen my eye roll against, like, how difficult and how much of a pain in the butt it's going to be to build with copper because of the waxing, the axe, and all that kind of stuff. It's just a waiting game. And even if you miss the mark, you don't have to mine stuff. You don't have to change stuff. You don't have to start over again. You can just use the axe to just take it back a tick or two to where you want it, which is cool.
So as far as your snapshot world goes, are you going to continue that into the next update? Are you going to continue playing in that world when 1.17 comes around? Or do you see yourself maybe going back to the Citadel and just waiting for a time when it's convenient to update the server?
Well, not to cannibalize the discussion later, but I don't see the point. Because what I will end up doing with the snapshot world, if part 2 snapshots start coming out in, down the line, then sure, like that, because it's a way for me to explore what is possible and what we have to be concerned about. So having a world that has no terrain updates and then changing that to include terrain updates will inform me how those terrain updates are also going to affect the Citadel. So I see more of that happening. But as far as the gameplay goes, then I don't really see the point. I mean, it's only a week before we'll be able to get this kind of stuff on the Citadel. So, like, if I'm going to spend hours looking for a geode naturally on the snapshot world, I might as well do that on the Citadel.
Yeah.
And then have access to all the things. Like, in that way, if I die on the Citadel, it's not a big deal. I have all the things. I could be back up and running in 5 minutes. Whereas on the snapshot world, that's not the case at all.
Yeah, seems pretty fair. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that after the emails, and like I said, I'm going to be chatting about the Minecraft Dungeons update as well, because I had a fun time with it. But in the meantime, let's get into some listener email.
If you would like to email the show, the main email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. That is for all messages to be read out on the show potentially. Please use this email address. First email, and only email actually, is from Pirate Guy 01, fishing in caves and cliffs. Hello, Pix and Joel. I've been a fan for a while now, about 2 years, and I love the podcast. I'm really excited for the Caves and Cliffs update, although I am disappointed that archaeology is going to be saved for a later update. I have an idea about fishing in caves and cliffs. With the aquifers and different local water levels in lush caves, wouldn't it be cool to have different fishing prospects in different cave biomes? Fishing is kind of a mini game in Minecraft, and I think it's useful and underrated. Although, while it's plentiful, should a player have enough patience, it can be a little boring. I think adding more variety to fishing would be a good way to make it more interesting, more fun, and useful. Maybe fishing in a ravine gets a higher chance of treasure without needing luck of the sea. Or fishing in a lush cave could cover a higher chance of fish biting without any lure enchantments. Fishing in a mountain biome could get you some emeralds as a treasure, or possibly a goat horn. Maybe rare treasure is a map showing you where an abandoned mine or the start of a copper iron vein could be. There's already an example like this in the game. Bamboo is junk in specific rivers to jungle biomes. I also think fishing in bulk would be a good way to gain some food and would add to the general fishing experience. A new item or tool would be a fishing net. Fishing nets could catch multiple fish at a time and maybe have an inventory similar to a bundle. It can only catch 64 items, including treasure, fish, and junk items you would usually catch when regular fishing rods. Filling up a net would take longer, but it would have a bigger payoff than fishing one item at a time. Fishing nets could also be used to trap and tie down aggressive mobs or villagers. Any mob, really. I would sure make moving villagers across the nether a lot easier. Again, love the podcast and would love to hear what you think. Pirate Guy 01 drowned.
And how appropriate. Expect Drowned Guy 01 to show up next week. But yeah, thank you for the email. And it sounds like this is an idea that's got a lot of thought put into it. And I've got to say, I really do agree. It reminds me a little bit of fishing in some other games, like Terraria, for example, where you can catch different fish depending on the biome that you fish in. And Terraria has a series of underground areas, underground biomes and locations, as well as ones on the surface. So this sounds a lot like that. And in Terraria, a lot of the variety of fish are put into making potions for yourself, and the potions in Terraria have like a really broad range of uses. But I do like the idea, and it does strike me as something that can be developed a lot more in future. The fishing mechanics have undergone some iterations lately just to prevent AFK fishing from being such a prevalent technique amongst the community. But I think there is potential for it to be expanded, not least because having tried out a while back when Lush Caves first became available as a single biome world preset, I went fishing in a cave to try and get hold of some food, because the only food I could get hold of at that point would be glowberries or anything that a zombie could drop that I could then farm. So it was kind of tricky to get food, not a problem you experience much in a default Minecraft world, but I tried fishing and then I realized that my fishing rate was vastly slowed down because of being underground, and fishing works faster if you are above the surface so that there is open sky above you, and even faster again if it's raining. So fishing for food in a cave was incredibly slow, but then, you know, in some cases, world generation could allow for cave fish to be a thing. You've got squid and the glow squid spawning below a certain level. Axolotls now doing the same thing, and you've got to imagine that as part of the ecosystem, axolotls might want fish to be down there, and that's how they've managed to thrive in the first place. So I do like the idea of lush caves having the opportunity to generate fish, and I would like to see an expansion to fishing that allows for stuff to happen in different biomes. I think that's an underused idea in the game so far.
It would definitely spice things up a bit. And I even to have that be something that could be used in something like Skyblock, you know, where instead of having to fish at the top of the world, of like if you could set up different fishing pools at different Y levels, which is challenging when there's only like air to try and go and set up and limited water and all that kind of stuff. Like it really kind of opens up some interesting ideas as to what you could use it for. The thing that stuck out for me was the suggestion of a goat horn, fishing in like a mountain lake or something, and maybe you get a goat horn. And I didn't use bundles. I didn't find them overly useful, but I also didn't like killing rabbits. Mm-hmm. There's probably going to be some people out there that don't want to kill goats for their horns, right? And so if you provide a different way to get the horn, when that eventually becomes available in the game, then that would be, again, just another way to get it. It takes longer, but hey, if you don't really want to punch goats, then that's good.
Yeah.
I thought that was a neat idea. I really did like the idea of the fishing net, not just because I think it would make fishing a little bit easier. I think it's a nice way to level up. I think that's the thing about fishing. It doesn't have any progression. Like sure, you can add some enchantments on your fishing rod, but if you had like different rods to craft, if you had different lures to make from different things that would catch you different items, I feel like that could be kind of cool. But the fishing net and using a different tool kind of opens that up and makes that feel a little bit more fun to me. But it's not just a fishing net. Like if you can use it as Pirate Guy suggested to capture mobs. I mean, we've seen it. Spiders do it in Minecraft Dungeons right now. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like I would love to be, especially because the villagers in my mind are not the smartest crayons in the box. So throwing a fishing net over them and having them go, oh, I guess I can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, good. Pass it. Like I'm not punching you. I'm not putting you in danger. I'm keeping you safe. I guess.
Yeah.
I like the idea, and it looks silly in my imagination. It feels practical in the game. I feel like it would be something fairly easy to implement, especially because like you can put mobs in boats, but it can be kind of tricky unless you know the tricks to get them out without hurting the mob or punching the mob. Other things can get in the boats with them. boats are not like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have like a land boat and have a villager in it. So like there's other things that I think that help with, the fishing net. And plus, like, depending on how the nets could work in the game, you could also use them as decorations. Like you could hang them on walls. Maybe you could use them to make like not tents, but like what looks like some sort of like lattice structure. Like there could be some multiple uses for it, which I know is something that for what we've seen over the years in Minecraft, they try to strive to make sure that something has more than just one use.
Yeah. I like the idea of somebody kind of Aquaman style going around with a fishing net and a trident, and at that point, kind of declaring themselves king of the sea. It's kind of similar to the way, I guess, splash potions of slowness or cobwebs might affect stuff, but if it actually freezes stuff in place, I think at that point the difficulty becomes combat balance for PvP, as often it is. So there's a lot of different angles to consider, but I also like the idea of it having a passive fishing mechanic added to it in the world. So like, you can put it down somewhere at the edge of a lake or a river or the ocean, and hopefully over time catch fish in it. I think some people have even created manual versions of this after live fish were added to the game, and basically set up an area where fish would end up swimming into cobwebs, where they'd either suffocate because they spent too long moving through them, or then players could kill them by various means and it would be a little bit easier to catch the fish. But then, yeah, there's potential for stuff like this to really expand, I think, in future. And honestly, having different treasures for different biomes, or just like different biomes being able to provide you a greater variety of fish is really appealing to me, and I think that could really work for people who enjoy the experience of fishing minigames. With that taken care of, I think it's probably time to move on to our roundtable discussion. Do you want to go first, since we already hinted at it earlier, talking about what you're going to do with your snapshot world in light of the Caves and Cliffs update coming imminently?
So the last few streams, I've been kind of thinking, like, what do I want to do with this world, if anything, between update part 1 and update part 2? And because I know that once update part 1 comes to the Citadel, because it doesn't change the terrain, we'll just be adding the features, and the capabilities of part 1 to the Citadel, and I'll play those when I get to them. After exploring a few of the new mechanics over the last few weeks in the snapshot survival play, I've basically done spending my time working on things like farms to collect the new materials and kind of see what we can do and explore those new mechanics. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, I've been hamstrung by not being able to find a geode naturally. And so I might have to resort to exploring that on my own in like a creative world or something. But I just don't see myself, even on the Citadel, expanding a great deal beyond my current project. Like, I mean, the medieval town base is going to be, I mean, sure, I'm hoping to find some uses for deep slate. Like, I'm hoping it makes better roofs than Blackstone, right? Blackstone has a odd texture. It's got a weird purple tint to it, where deep slate really does look like slate. So slate roofs, like it could be great. Plus it has all the different variants, like stairs and slabs and that kind of thing. It doesn't change gameplay much, though. Like, I don't feel like I'm playing Minecraft any differently when I play the snapshot. I'm just looking for new blocks and new stuff. And so it hasn't changed my approach dramatically. And while I'm sure I can use copper, I've got very specific use cases with it. I'm not making a copper city. Like I think I mentioned the copper cisterns I want to put in the mead brewery underneath the keep, just stuff like that, which is going to be great, and it's going to be a great use for that texture. But I don't see myself using it a lot currently. Again, always happy to have my mind changed, but the decision remains: if I'm not playing snapshot content, what am I going to do between Caves and Cliffs update part 1 and part 2? And I've said a few times on the show, and I've definitely expressed it on multiple deaths in the snapshot world, that I don't see myself being a hardcore player. I would do it on like a weekend thing for fun, but I don't see myself trying to put any real effort into a world, because I know that wouldn't feel good when I eventually did die. And that's not what I want from Minecraft. So I've been looking at a little bit more modded stuff, because I think a lot of the appeal of Caves and Cliffs Part 2 is that it does feel modded from a terrain generation standpoint. Like, it feels like what mods have been doing for a while. And I'm definitely drawn to mods and mod packs that have terrain generation and biomes, like a lot more biomes than the vanilla game has. I just like that sense of discovery and finding new stuff around the corner, not just the same 4 to 5 biomes that you see most times in the overworld. So I've been kind of bouncing my brain around as like, if I want to try to do something in the modded space, and if I do, what kind of mod do I want to play with, or a mod pack? Research, it's just been bombarding me with a bunch of mods and mod packs that don't necessarily improve the game. They just add stuff to it for the sake of it. Now, This is going beyond just the biome stuff. The biome stuff looks great. I've seen a bunch of different things from Fabric and other developers and like mod developers and whatnot, and they look fantastic. But when it gets down to like the adding new tools or adding new tech or adding new things, most of the time they feel like either a one-stop shop for like, this is just someone's idea of making an easy button, or they just don't really seem to add stuff, with the exception of something like a food mod. Something like Pam's Harvest Craft adds a lot of, gameplay and decorative blocks, and like that is more robust. But a lot of the smaller mods just seem to add a little thing, and it's like, well, why is that even in the pack other than just because you wanted it to be there? And I don't know if I want to go down the road of compiling my own mod pack, because then I just spend, if not as much or more time compiling the pack as I would actually playing it.
Yeah. And
when you go for saying, okay, well, there are people out there that know more than me, that have done this more than I have, there's not really a middle ground that I'm finding. I'm happy for someone to write into the show, and let me know. But there seems to be, here's a small data pack or a mod pack that does like one thing, like say create, like it has some stuff in there, but it's mostly focused on this one thing. But then you've got other mod packs like all of Fabric 3, and a lot of other packs I see are these kitchen sink packs, and there's just so much in them. And I don't necessarily want to play all of it, but I know I don't have to, but it just doesn't seem like, at that point, it just feels like too much, and it feels like they just confuse one another. We've talked about it before with like, two different mods being in there for two different reasons, but then they both have copper blocks in them.
Yeah.
And so you have to use one copper block from one mod and one copper block from the other mod. Otherwise, they don't work with one another. And I say, well, that's just poor mod pack planning,
Mm-hmm.
And I can't seem to find the middle ground of like a modest mod pack to explore, because I think that's what I would do. Like if I was to put time into something else, because the Survival Snapshot series has been fun. It's been doing well. It's provided me with a weekday stream day, which is great. I'd like to try to keep that up, but I don't want to just do the snapshots. I'd like to try and branch out and do some other stuff in between news, because there's probably going to be a little bit of a lull between, snapshots from 117 through 118, right?
No, my brain is reverting to that meme format of the joke. If there is mod and there is also modder, that implies the existence of modest. And so, yeah, there may be a modest mod pack out there. If not, I do like that name for one. I think somebody should do that. But no, I agree. I think the problem with modded in general for me has always been that it adds stuff that the mod creator thinks is either an improvement to Minecraft, which is a subjective thing and not necessarily always something I agree with, or it adds something that just kind of broadens one thing without adding too much depth. And the search to find a mod pack which is focused enough to have a goal like that in mind, to truly sort of expand on some of Minecraft's ideas and take them a little bit further, you tend to find that more in individual mods like Quark, which just tend towards a more vanilla plus feel and therefore don't really add a whole lot in terms of in-game objectives and expansion to progression and the stuff that makes Minecraft a compelling experience. Modded is always so much more subjective for that kind of stuff. And I think the sort of renaissance of Skyblock mod packs a while ago with kind of Skyfactory 3 and Project Ozone and a few of those really kind of revived that for a while. But I think lately the modded scene has been a little bit in flux, with people leaving Forge and moving more towards Fabric, but Fabric not being the right framework for slightly more in-depth content mods, and I don't know quite what the process of that is. I don't pay attention to the modded community as closely as other folks might, but I do sort of wonder at what point Fabric starts to get some of the depth of mods that Forge has, had for a while. Things like Thormcraft is probably the one I come back to as the one that compelled me the most. When I played like a kitchen sink mod pack, I went, oh, there's a really in-depth magic mod here. Let me take a look at this. And I really enjoy stuff like that because it has its own sort of internal universe within Minecraft, and it sort of turns Minecraft into a bit of a different game, but it has its own objectives and ties it into the mechanics that already exist, the physics of the world, and so forth. And I don't know if anything like that is really available for Fabric yet, or if it is, it tends to just be done in a slightly different way. And because they are updating more and more frequently, and the baseline version that people run mod packs on is changing more and more frequently, I think it's almost worth holding off on like really trying to nail down a modded experience for now, because I think 1.17 is going to be where a lot of modded camps out for a while. And I mostly say that because I've heard from modders that the changes in 1.18 with terrain generation and the way the code is having to shift to take into account new world height and depth and various other things about world generation is just going to mess with the way mods are coded for a while. And even with Java 16 being introduced and having a little bit more of the, more modern programming language to play around with, it might be a while before we see modded really step forward into part 2 of Caves and Cliffs. So I do wonder if we're going to see a sort of another renaissance of mod packs being made for 1.17 that really starts to maybe have a bit more quality control and a bit more of that kind of approach to curating mod packs that led to a Skyfactory 3, which was a smash hit mod pack for the Skyblock crowd, but also for people looking to get into modded in general. It's still, to this day, the modded experience I think I have enjoyed the most was a couple of runs through Skyfactory 3.
I've thought about that because I did enjoy kind of like that early game kind of like technical approach to Skyblock, when I played that. It was fun to do the early snapshot world and kind of go from survival and get built up pretty fast. Because I started in a desert village, I was able to ramp up pretty quickly. And I felt like I was also ramping up pretty quickly when I played my Olive Fabric 3 playthrough. Now, that was, I think, pre-116. So the Olive Fabric 3 that's out now is a newer version. And it looks to be, like the branding has changed. It looks to be handled by a different crew. And I'm curious to see if there's a way for me to find something like that, like find a tech progression. Because what I've really liked about the snapshot playthrough is like I like doing the farming, because I've been just building for so long on Citadel, because all of our essential farms are basically done. Like we don't have a real need for stuff. I can go to different areas of the server quite quickly and get ink from farm A and prismarine from farm B and all that kind of stuff. So to do that kind of stuff over again isn't really necessary. But to do some tech stuff in a mod, I really enjoyed in Olive Fabric 3. I don't remember the name of the mod that I was playing, but essentially there was like, grinding down iron ore and doubling your ore. And it was an interesting learning process. It wasn't terribly hard. And I also look at things like the Create mod, which is very technical and is seeing some popular, YouTubers play with it right now and streamers play with it right now. And on one hand, it looks cool and fun. And on the other, I just think like, I don't necessarily get the best performance of Minecraft now. And adding all these moving parts and stuff into it when it's not necessarily designed for that, I'd be better off playing Satisfactory, I think, to have that kind of experience. So while it's a great looking mod and really cool, I don't know if that's the experience I want. Like I kind of still want the Minecraft experience. I just want to maybe try to find a way to tweak it a bit. And the one thing that I'm considering is taking a really good look at Olive Fabric 3, the current one, and maybe going through and removing stuff that I just feel is either redundant or there to try to make it more appealing to more people and just try to dumb it down to me. Where I end up with a shortcoming is that I don't know enough about the mods as to what is reliant on things.
Yeah. You don't want to yank out something vital and realize that was connecting two of the other more important mods together. Yeah,
precisely. Now, that stuff can be pretty clear, but you also have the daunting task of like there's 10 pages of related mods in this pack, and you're just like, oh gosh, like do I really want to go through all that? And I'm even considering like, because of some rapport I have with a couple people that have been doing data packs and stuff, I'm curious if I can find or talk to somebody and maybe even commission a custom mod to be used with this kind of experience to make it a little bit more personal and less about just like playing something that someone else has put together. It's like, well, if I take the time, if I'm being this picky about it, maybe I can take the time to make it honed for what I feel would be, a better experience for me. I don't want to end up in that camp of people where so many of these mods I find are called better this and better that. And it's like, what? It's a little bit presumptuous to say that it's better. It's different.
Well,
yeah.
That kind of vibe always, like it rubs me the wrong way a little bit. It's also like that's how they've got to sell it in a way too.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
I do wonder though, like when it comes to your snapshot world and moving the Citadel onto 1.17, I wonder if maybe you're finding yourself running out of things to do or just kind of spinning your wheels a little bit in the snapshot world because it's not permanent. And while I expect, you've seen enough of the mechanics to know what you would do in the Citadel and what you wouldn't, but I do wonder once 1.17 kicks in, maybe you start to find the medieval city project is feeling a little bit stale. Maybe the solution then is to play some modded for a little bit, but maybe if you start another project in the same way that you've moved on from the modern city project to this one, maybe you try and push the boundaries a little bit, go out a little bit further, start a project where you can start mining for copper and amethyst and try and find some of those newer blocks, and then more projects start to suggest themselves. I think investment in the world itself plays a bigger part than we realize in how we want to appreciate some of these newer features and the kind of stuff that you want to do if you're feeling like the mechanics themselves aren't suggesting anything to you on face value, just reading about them or tinkering with them in creative or wherever it happens to be for listeners at home. Then I think once you bring that stuff into a world that you actually feel a stronger connection to, maybe you'll find that the stuff will tide you over at least until the end of this year.
Yeah, and that's the point of the different zones on the Citadel is it's like when you're getting stuck on one thing, go to a different zone that has a completely different block palette, a completely different vibe, modern city versus, medieval town. Like you can't get much more different,
Did you ever start on the sci-fi zone? I believe you mentioned that a while back, but I don't know if that ever...
I've been researching places, and I think the best place for it is going to be like a Mushroom Island. So I've been looking to find like the best one / the biggest one that I can find. There are a few that are not terribly far away, but I haven't gone too far afield, and I haven't started that yet. But yeah, like that's on my list. The other thing that's on the list now, and I'm glad that we waited, is we did have plans to do like an Asia Pacific kind of Ming Dynasty kind of idea, and oxidized copper is a great color to go with, and so is regular copper to go with like the reds and the jades and like the prismarine colors and stuff that you can do for those kind of like ancient Chinese builds and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that there's possibility there, and it's a nice bright color change and to be at a different environment. The place that we've picked out is like next to a jungle, so there's lots of green, lots of big trees. Yeah, so there's stuff like that I think could be really cool. But I just haven't kind of explored too much of that, and I feel like part of me, I can be like a dog with a bone when I start a project, like until I'm done at least the half of the town that I'm working on in the medieval area. Like I don't want to step away from it, because I did that with the main city. Like I finished a block, like I finished one side from one crossroad to the other, and I did all the buildings and stuff, and I thought, okay, this is a good time to step away from this and do something different, because I didn't leave a building half done. I didn't, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so there will be some bouncing around, but yeah, the sci-fi zone would be a good one to flip back to as well.
Yeah, I mean, now you've got the neon light on all of the signs. I expect there's some pretty cool stuff you could do with that. I expect you could, and even like with the sort of ancient China inspired area, you've got stuff like moss blocks to play around with as well. Yep. Like potentially kind of throw some overgrown ruins in there with the jungle environment. Like the wheels will start spinning, I think. And I think this update is clearly focusing more on the blocks and stuff. So I feel like it's an update that deserves a build project for the most part. There will be a few mechanics here and there that the more technically minded people can go for. There'll be a few things that, people who like exploring will still be able to go out and find. But I think a lot of what's happening in part 1 of Caves and Cliffs is going to be a very builder-centric environment. And then for part 2, you're going to find the explorers get everything they've wanted and more at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to hold my breath. Like, I don't want to just wait. I want to try to do something and move forward, you know?
Yeah.
And I think if I've been spinning my wheels, I'm sure there's been a number of other people, including some of our listeners, that have been spinning their wheels as well. So, like, if you have thoughts, if you have ideas, you know, hit us up with an email, spunchuckmail@gmail.com. And if you have any mod packs that you want to recommend as well, happy to do that. Or you can just toss them in the Discord if you're one of our Patreon members as well. Speaking of holding breath, though, how was your week?
I was going to make the same joke. Yes. So, Hidden Depths DLC for Minecraft Dungeons is pretty fun. It's been great. I've played through the first 2 story levels on the stream, and I had a bit of trouble getting the secret level because of raid captains, which is something I'll get back to in a minute. But if you've seen the trailers for Hidden Depths, if you've seen any screenshots of Hidden Depths, you know that this is a very pretty expansion to Minecraft Dungeons, and it really like lives up to that expectation. It's a beautiful work. Like, the environment design has just been ramped up, as it normally is with Minecraft Dungeons. Of course, they do a really great job of this, but I think having learned from the style of DLCs that they've put out, I would say this one feels close enough to maybe Jungle Awakens, but like with a little bit more focus on what it wants to do. You got a first level that emphasizes exploration. There's a fairly short and direct path through it if you just want to complete the level quickly, but there are lots of, you know, side rooms and caves that you can jump into, you know, rifts in the ocean floor that you can jump down into, and it leads to like a more of a kind of undersea volcanic vent kind of landscape, which is, I think, where you find the scroll that unlocks the secret level. So they've really thought about the structure of the ocean and expanded on ideas that vanilla Minecraft has, with, you know, ravines filled with magma blocks and the like. But they've just kind of thrown in a little bit of Dungeons flair. The second one has more of a structure feel, because you're meant to be at that point exploring an ocean monument, which is a huge expansion from the kind of ocean monument landscape we're used to from vanilla Minecraft, of course. But it has more of a dungeon crawl feel to it instead of exploring a more organic landscape. And it has sections in which conduits appear. And initially, when you pick one up, it is clearing out an area of water around itself so that there is an air pocket. And once you start picking up the conduits and using them to power different things, they open doors for you. You can also pick up the conduit and just carry it with you through the rest of the level. You don't have to use them disposably, which means that if you're not into the water mechanics and how they feel, because they have really changed up the feel of gameplay, you can spend the rest of the level zipping around with a conduit on your head, and you're running as though you're running above ground. So I think it's a really neat sort of optional mechanic in a way to change up your gameplay style that way. But the water mechanics really have changed gameplay. You start to feel like a bit of the drag of being underwater, and it's, I mean, I say drag in the kind of more physical sense, like it's not as tedious as it might sound to be slowed down a little bit. And that's because the rest of the environment has been slowed down too. And so if you want to change up your setup to include more speed boosting artifacts, you really start to feel the advantage of that over some of the other stuff in the environment. And where stacking different speed effects like a swiftness potion and boots of swiftness and a swiftness enchantment on your armor might have made it almost uncontrollably fast if you were playing on any of the other levels, underwater that's a really solid strategy, because you can get to the drowned that's throwing a trident at you before it has a chance to fire one off.
Nice. Now, with the conduits that you're carrying around, does that then remove your ranged ability? Like, I'm thinking
Yes.
about like picking up a piece of TNT. Like,
Yeah,
that's same idea.
it's something I didn't notice because I play melee only. This is still
Right.
my silly kind of challenge to myself when I started as a character with no weapons whatsoever, and now I still just use the fighter's bindings, which are gauntlet-style weapons, and I don't use ranged weapons. So it does, it gives you the disadvantage of not being able to use ranged weapons. TNT, by the way, has been replaced by tridents, which, because I guess underwater explosions wouldn't seem quite the same, and adding the physics of throwing TNT would be changed because the ranged weapons physics have also been changed. I expect they decided, we'll just give it an underwater feel. And instead of TNT, the enemies will drop tridents. You pick one of those up, and it effectively sticks into something. It's kind of like a sticky grenade from an FPS kind of game. It sticks to whatever mob you throw it at, and after a couple of seconds, a lightning bolt happens like it's got channeling attached to the trident. But it's not an instantaneous thing. It is a timed thing allowing you to get away because it will absolutely impact you too. So yeah, you do have to trade off a little bit. And that was confusing to me at first because I was trying to pick up the conduit and I couldn't because I was carrying around these tridents because I hadn't thrown them at anything yet. So the mechanics there weren't, immediately explained, but I figured it out quite quickly. And so, yeah, if you're a melee-only player, just carry the conduit around with you. You can throw it on the ground, leave an area of air around you, and then once you're done shooting everything, pick it back up again. But I think that also adds like a neat element of almost leapfrog you're playing with the conduit to try and gain the advantage over the enemies. But yeah, I ended up adding in boots of swiftness to make myself a little bit faster. And the ranged enemies, particularly the drowned who throw tridents, are lethal at higher difficulties. They are really, really tough. And I think my armor was partly to blame because I'm a little bit underpowered and for the difficulty level, and it might balance better for people who either aren't on Apocalypse Plus or don't have a silly play style like me and just kind of equip anything that they can get their hands on that's more powerful than their previous build was. But yeah, the drowned can do a huge amount of damage with those tridents. It really feels like getting attacked by a trident on Java where suddenly you're 6 hearts down and it's you're desperately running for cover at that point. So yeah, I struggled my way through some sections of that, but it was a pleasant struggle rather than a chore. And at the end of it all, the story is that another shard of the Orb of Dominance has ended up corrupting an Elder Guardian, and what you end up with is this massive Elder Guardian to fight as the boss, which has appeared in the show in the DLC art, which we shared last week, I think. So it's really not a huge spoiler. But I honestly felt the boss fight felt a little underwhelming. It was a fun fight, but nothing has quite lived up to the Heart of Ender fight in terms of spectacle and in terms of like variety and the strategy you have to employ to take down the boss. Because Heart of Ender basically turns into like a bullet hell kind of thing with like lasers firing at you and the boss is running all over the place and then spewing projectiles, and that feels a lot kind of very arcadey and quite intense. This one, the Elder Guardian just kind of swims from side to side, fires its laser at you occasionally. You have a few blocks you can hide behind. When it comes out of cover, you come out of cover, you hit it a few times, and then you dart back behind a pillar. And it's that kind of rinse and repeat strategy. There's not really a huge amount else to it. I think the Tempest Golem from Howling Peaks is still the best DLC boss because there are sort of phases to it, and there's a little bit of strategy involved with it, but overall, I think the boss doesn't have to be the main focus of the whole thing. I think the levels themselves are still really fun to play through.
I mean, I watched a portion of your stream when you were playing it, and my gosh, the level design and decoration just looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And that combined with the subtle details, like you mentioned about projectiles changing, like I saw an arrow like go through the air and then hit the water and just kind of do what you would expect it to do. It basically flopped and kind of lost all forward momentum and kind of listed sideways. Like that's really clever, to kind of really change the way that you do things and probably try to get you to use more of the things, the items and weapons and stuff that are part of the Hidden Depths DLC. How, like, I know you said like the moving in the water and stuff really changed the way that the gameplay felt. How did you feel like the level design changed? Was there a lot of like verticality, like going down?
Oh yes,
things and stuff. Do you find that was that a fresh take on things?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in the second level, the one leading up to the boss fight, there are some sections where you're walking through a section of the level and the floor just ends, but you can see the sort of vague silhouette and blur of scenery below you, and so you're encouraged to drop down from that point, or there is a spring, like one of those clam springs that kind of throws you into this pit. There are even sections later on where you're exploring this monument and the floor crumbles out from underneath you, and then a wave of enemies appears from almost like airlocks on either side, making it feel even more like a kind of submarine or like a BioShock style scenario where, you know, you get ambushed in these sections and then the floor crumbles again and you just keep falling down through the different levels of it. They have really tried to convey depth, and the title kind of says as much, but yeah, it does turn out to be a really, really neat way of exploring the environment. And a lot of the time you worry about whether you're going to be able to backtrack and get back to some other areas, but then they've provided ways for you to do that a lot of the time. So
nice.
Don't worry about exploring these levels and feeling like there's a point of no return other than maybe the boss arena. As far as the other stuff goes, I had fun messing around with raid captains. Raid captains only appear in a level that you've already completed, so you don't have to worry about them popping up the first time you run through something, but then... and I think they also won't appear on secret missions, but they will appear when you do any of the basic storyline levels a second time. And they're a fun addition for people who want extra endgame challenge. They basically, when you defeat one of them, they add on one of the modifiers that you could expect to see in a daily challenge or any of the seasonal trials that are happening for the anniversary event or the Halloween event that we've had before, in which basically it adds a boost to the enemy's abilities, like they are, 40% faster, they hit 30% harder, or it just adds to the threat level, which I think is effectively the difficulty that you're choosing before you go into the level. So like Apocalypse plus 1 through Apocalypse plus 30, it's effectively like ramping up the difficulty to the next, the next piece of that. And I maybe fought 3 or 4 raid captains, and then the stage immediately became too hard for me. And again, I think that was still because I hadn't quite dialed in my setup and hadn't got some better armor at that point. So I haven't completed a level with raid captains to know what the reward is you get at the end. But to my understanding, it's basically an extra end-of-level chest that you get. So normally you'll get an artifact or a piece of gear from the loot pool for that mission, and I think you get another one that has an extra chance to re-roll to be a unique piece of armor. And the more banners you collect from defeating these raid captains, the more, the higher the chance of getting a unique weapon or armor or whatever there is. So potentially a way to assist people who are, into the game itself, but want to speed up the loot grind a little bit to really get the equipment that they're looking for.
So I played a couple of levels with my, I think it's an in-between character I have. Actually, I think it's the same character I used when you and myself and Exumavoid played some dungeons together.
Yeah.
And I ran into the raid captains. I didn't realize what they were. I knew that I had the free update with the Hidden Depths because I'm not playing the expansion. I'm just playing on the Xbox. And I saw the captain. I was like, well, okay, is this just something... I thought it was just something new that I've missed over the multiple updates I've not played. And I realized I clued in that this was from the new thing. And I ended up with 4 different modifiers, I think, on the level. And much like you, I was quickly like, oh, this is impossible.
Yeah.
This is not happening at this current level. Because, I'm power level like 16 or something. Like, it's not, I was playing in Creeper Woods for a second time. I was trying to explore the blacksmith and have him update some daggers, and I had to go run 3 missions at a certain level. So I was like, well, I'll just go run the stuff that I think is I'm familiar with. Anyway, I'm killing things, and I have to, they don't leave you alone, so I had to kill the raid captain. But it wasn't clear to me that when they drop the banner, like if you have a choice to not pick up the banner, or whether the effects happen immediately. But in a game where the MO is pick up all the things and punch all the things, I immediately realized, oh crap, I didn't necessarily want to pick up a random banner and now have 20% less health and night mode, which by the way just spawns things all the time no matter
constantly,
what. So good luck going into your inventory or checking the map. It's constant. And then there was like another one that reduced my health further, and another one that increased the threat level. And from what I could tell, the threat level just added more mobs. They didn't seem necessarily stronger to me. There was just a lot more. Like zombies, it looked like World War Z. There was a lot. There was a lot, which provided its own problems because I was running with like not fist weapons, but melee weapons like daggers and what are they called? Sickles?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was using those. And so like I ended up having an issue where if there was too many mobs around me and they was behind me, I would be end up taking shots. And ranged becomes a real issue because like one shot from a skeleton was 30% of my health. I was like, okay, this is now hardcore, as opposed to what I was playing at. And I mean, lesson learned, but it was frustrating because I had picked up some cool stuff that I had to then leave because I couldn't complete the level. So it was cool. It's cool options, and they're fun, big, they're well animated. Like everything about them is really neat, but I didn't quite have enough research on them before I played. So I feel like there could be more communicated to you. Like they give you a pop-up, before you start the new free update as to what they are and what they do. But I feel like there could be a little bit more of a in-level sort of situation, like something like, you're about to pick up this banner. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Like yes or no, as opposed to just like, it's a banner. Do you want it? And most of the time you're just like, yeah, I want the thing. And it's like, oh, no, wait, I didn't want that thing.
Yeah. I think one thing that Minecraft Dungeons is now really crying out for is some kind of in-game wiki, some kind of in-game resource or codex or something that will allow you to go back through like descriptions of some of the mobs that you fight with like a little bit of lore text or something about some of them. But in the case of stuff like raid captains and the mystery banners that they drop, I think it would be really good to have an explanation that you can come back to, because I think Minecraft Dungeons is one of those games people pick up and play and then they put down for a month or two and then they pick it back up again, or like a couple of weeks or whatever between play sessions, because a lot of us are just returning to longer Minecraft worlds and stuff, or playing a variety of games. So I think having some kind of in-game resource for remembering what some of this stuff is could be quite useful. And I also really want it to, for like collection purposes, to kind of like, pick up a little bit more of the unique weapons and stuff. And before I salvage them, I want to make sure that I've at least recorded which ones I've collected so far and see a little bit about each of them. But yeah, I think this is a fun DLC. I can't really report on the anniversary missions because the only chance I really had to play this was on stream on Thursday, but I definitely want to try and get those done before the anniversary ends, just to see what they're about. I think the missions themselves are going to be more of the same, more like the kind of daily trials stuff, but then getting those unique items is always quite fun. And the next DLC that should be out for Minecraft Dungeons is going to be themed around the end, at which point I'm interested to see which direction their content goes for this game, if they decide to wrap up, updates and stuff there, or if they have other plans for it, a kind of end game for Minecraft Dungeons, if the end is really going to be the end of the story. Because it seems like with this many DLCs now, and so much of the story revolving around this mysterious orb that has this sort of vibe of the end about it when you encounter it in the course of the base game, I think there is potential for the end to be like the climactic DLC and the conclusion of the storyline of Minecraft Dungeons. So it'll be really interesting to see.
You don't anticipate any deep dark switch over? Like there's been any kind of that coming over into Minecraft Dungeons? Maybe not with this storyline, but maybe the start of a new one.
I would love to be honest, but I think the problem then becomes that Minecraft Dungeons has had this long and this amount of stuff to be able to pull from Minecraft for a while, and it'd be a matter of sustaining itself until a vanilla Minecraft update comes out with more stuff they can incorporate. And
right.
So like if they add the Deep Dark and they add some more stuff related to the cave update in the fullness of time, then awesome. But in the meantime, they have to have something to sustain the game. And with them putting out a DLC, I'd say like every 3 months or so, we've had a new DLC for Dungeons at this point. There's been 4 and... has it been 4? I can't quite remember. But either way, we've had 4 or 5, and it's only just come around to the game's first anniversary. I can't imagine them being able to churn out that amount of DLC content without either coming up with some stuff on their own, or having to have some kind of end game activity to keep players involved until the Caves and Cliffs DLC can come out, and until the DLC can come out that's themed around 1.19 or anything like that. I'm curious to see what their strategy becomes, because I can't really foresee them taking much more content from vanilla Minecraft at this point.
But speaking of more content for vanilla Minecraft, there is a bit of breaking news here at the end of the show. I'm going to give a shout out to Shepard in our live chat for pointing out that pre-release 2 for 1.17 has just been released. Nothing crazy, about a dozen bug fixes, give or take, most of which seem pretty standard for like, hey, gas explosions were unlimited power and causing crashes, slimes and magma cubes not interacting with players, other tags that were not intuitive, things like that. And we'll have a link to that on the Minecraft.net article as well this week.
Yeah, the size of the bug fix list there is pretty small, and it does kind of lend some credence to, hey, we think this update is ready to go out on June 8th. So yeah, fingers crossed that remains the case, and we'll be potentially using next week's show to kind of recap the Nether updates, because of course we'll be releasing next Monday's show the day before Caves and Cliffs Part 1 releases. So looking forward to hashing out everything we've learned and everything we've done in the Nether updates as we look forward into Caves and Cliffs Part 1. But for today, that's going to be it for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff we've talked about today, including all of those lovely announcements from Minecraft.net, at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you get some value out of the show, please consider putting some value back in. You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. You can join our community there. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when it is recorded in Discord every week. And it also gets us closer to our next milestone goals, which is a monthly Minecraft audio hangout where we get to talk about everything that our patrons have been doing in Minecraft that month. We are currently at 256 patrons, which is 4 stacks of patrons. We're very proud of that. It's also up 3 from last week, so thank you to our new arrivals. And special thanks go out to our content engineers, General Pattern 82, Greener Canuck, Hunter 555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance and say, hey, you should listen to The Spawn Chunks. And you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube. Honestly, wherever you can find a podcast. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com. And of course, you can find the patron-only RSS feed on the Patreon page, and that's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixorifs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixorifs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is now in its last week, which is a very strange thing to say. But I will be planning a bunch of new and fun series for the Caves and Cliffs updates, so stick around at youtube.com/Pixorifs. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I mostly do behind-the-scenes work for the Survival Guide, and I'm sure behind-the-scenes work for all of my newer projects as well. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. You can listen to my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment, which is at thecitadelcafe.com. I'm going to be recording with Stephen ESC this week. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media, and of course, Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I continue to plug away in the medieval world, or medieval build, I guess, on the Citadel. And I guess we'll see what happens with the snapshots and the modded play. Well, to stay tuned. Twitch.tv/Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and we might be out of our depth.